They say you never forget the first time someone sees you, really sees you. That morning, when the sunlight spilled across her kitchen like it belonged there, I realized I'd been invisible for far too long. She was standing by the counter, mid-40s but effortless, like she'd learned the art of being both commanding and fragile at once. Her hair had that quiet silver streak I only noticed when she leaned her head to the side, scanning the mail, and I swore the sunlight caught it just right. She didn't know I was watching. Maybe she never would, except that somehow, I already did. I had come over because my mom had mentioned her cousin lived just down the hall. A casual hello? A visit that was supposed to last 10 minutes. But 10 minutes stretched like elastic when she smiled, not the polite smile people give strangers, but the one that made a room feel warmer than it had any right to. Coffee? She asked, without looking at me, hands fiddling with the spoon in the jar. I nodded, muttering something dumb, like a human who suddenly forgot how words worked. She glanced at me, just for a second, and the tilt of her eyebrow made my chest tighten. The apartment smelled faintly of vanilla and old books. A window cracked open somewhere, letting in the city hum that somehow sounded distant here. I wanted to lean closer, pretend I had a reason, anything, just to feel the quiet pulse of her presence. But I didn't. I froze in place, a 20-something boy trying to not stare at someone 20 years older, someone impossibly alive. You don't have to leave right away, she said suddenly, voice lower than before, almost a whisper. My head snapped toward her. Her eyes held a strange mixture of mischief and something else I couldn't name. I stumbled. My words failed me. She laughed softly, a sound that made my stomach ache in a way I hadn't known I could ache. Stay. Until I say you can leave, she added, leaning against the counter, arms crossed, and the air shifted. I wanted to retreat, to respect whatever line she'd drawn, but my feet didn't move. They weren't supposed to. Somehow, staying felt like the only option that mattered. I sat, careful not to appear desperate, careful not to seem younger than I was. She poured coffee for herself, then for me, but didn't hand it over immediately. Our fingers brushed as she placed the cup down, and I swear the world contracted just enough for me to notice every tremble in her grip. We didn't speak for a moment. Just small, quiet gestures, the steam curling up from our mugs, the city hum outside, my hands wrapped around something warm that wasn't my own heartbeat. I wanted to ask her about her day, about her life, but I felt like opening my mouth might break the spell. And maybe it already was breaking. Because the doorbell rang. Sharp. Sudden. Intrusive. We both froze. Her head turned toward the sound, eyes wide, lips parted like she hadn't expected it. I realized, for the first time, how fragile the quiet moment had been. She didn't move to the door. Her eyes found mine, searching, and in that look, something passed: caution, curiosity, longing, maybe all three. I didn't know if I should speak, or stay silent, or move. Who could that be? I whispered, though my voice sounded louder than I intended. She didn't answer. Not yet. But the way she held my gaze. I knew she hadn't forgotten me. Not really. And I also knew I didn't want to leave. The doorbell rang again, impatient now. And I realized, whatever this was, it had just begun. The doorbell had stopped ringing, but the sound lingered in my head like an echo I couldn't shake. She didn't move toward the door, and neither did I. Somehow, staying put felt braver than fleeing. I noticed the faint crease at the corner of her eyes, the one that deepened whenever she smiled. It wasn't the kind of crease that only comes with age. It was the mark of someone who had loved, lost, and learned to hold her guard just so. I wanted to ask what she'd lost, but even the thought felt intrusive. I've lived here a while, she said quietly, almost to herself, picking up her mug again. Her fingers traced the rim, slow, absent-minded. Neighbors don't visit much. Family even less. Maybe that's why you're here. Her words weren't a question, but I felt compelled to answer anyway. I don't have much family around, I said, surprising myself with the honesty. My voice was softer than I intended, the kind of confession that hangs in the air, waiting for someone to catch it. She tilted her head, not saying anything, but her eyes softened. There was something dangerous about how easy it felt to open up to her. I knew it wasn't just the age gap. It was that she had this quiet gravity, a way of pulling me closer without saying a word. And it terrified me. Because nothing about this was simple or expected. I was 22, barely out of college, still fumbling through life. She was everything I wasn't supposed to want. Her laugh came suddenly, soft, but tinged with something wistful. I had a boyfriend once. A long time ago. Thought it was forever, you know? She paused, staring into the coffee cup as if it could answer. Turns out, forever has an expiration date. I felt the weight in her voice, the unspoken years of regret. My chest tightened, not just for the story she told, but for the moments she didn't. The spaces she left open for someone to step in, to understand her without words. I knew I shouldn't feel this way, but I did. I started, hesitated, then stopped. There were things I wanted to say, words that might break the delicate rhythm we had, so I kept them inside. But my fingers twitched on the edge of the table, like they couldn't resist reaching for her presence. She caught my glance, and for a moment, it felt like time held its breath. There was a memory hanging between us, me as a kid, sneaking into her hallway to borrow sugar, and her laughing at my awkwardness without a trace of judgment. The memory was decades old, yet the connection felt alive. She leaned back slightly, letting out a quiet sigh. Our hands brushed, light, accidental, electric. I felt it down to my toes. Neither of us pulled away, even as the city hum outside reminded us that reality still existed. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the age difference, not the unspoken rules, not the warning signs blinking at the edge of my mind. Just that brush of fingers, that quiet acknowledgement that whatever this was already becoming impossible to ignore. And somewhere deep in the silence that followed, I realized I didn't want to ignore it. The sound of footsteps in the hallway froze me. I'd barely had time to register her stiffening, the way her fingers tightened around the mug. Just a package, she muttered, but the way her eyes darted toward the door said everything. I wanted to tell her it was fine, that I could handle whatever it was, but the words stuck in my throat. We both knew it wasn't just a package. A shadow appeared under the door. She swallowed, smooth but tense, and the corner of her mouth twitched, half amusement, half worry. My pulse throbbed in my ears. I realized I'd been leaning too close, maybe closer than anyone should. The door opened, and it was just her neighbor, older, casual, harmless, but the tension didn't dissipate. It lingered like smoke, wrapping around us. She smiled politely, the kind that hid 1,000 thoughts, and I caught it, the way her shoulders relaxed only after he'd gone. I laughed nervously, scratching the back of my neck. That was intense. Not really, she said, voice flat, but her eyes didn't lie. They held mine, and I could see the storm she tried to keep behind a polite smile. My stomach twisted. We sat there in silence, but the air between us had changed. My fingers itched to reach for hers again, to close the space we'd created without speaking. I knew I shouldn't. I knew I was younger, reckless, and naive. But something in her gaze made me feel like rules didn't apply, like every risk I felt inside was worth it. Do you ever think about, what if? I whispered. My own words surprised me, and I immediately regretted them. What if what? Her voice was soft, careful, and the faintest tremor betrayed her. This, I said, barely audible, and I couldn't look away. She looked away first, tracing patterns on the counter with a finger, pretending she wasn't burning the same space I was. I could feel the pull between us, a magnetic tension that neither of us wanted to admit. I wanted to reach for her lips, for the warmth of her skin, but I stopped, leaving the words unsaid, leaving the air electric. A sudden vibration on the counter startled both of us. Her phone. She picked it up, read a message, and her eyes went wide. I caught the flash of panic, the way her grip on the phone tightened, knuckles white. It's my ex, she murmured, almost too quickly, closing the screen like it burned her fingers. He He wants to meet. Tonight. The words hit me like a cold wave. My chest tightened, my jaw went rigid. I knew this was the line I wasn't supposed to cross, the invisible boundary we'd already skirted dangerously close to. She looked at me then, not pleading, not apologetic, but vulnerable in a way that made my heart thrum. I wanted to tell her to forget him, to stay, to let this, whatever this was, happen. But I didn't. Instead, I reached out, just a fingertip brushing hers on the counter. She didn't pull away. And for a moment, the world shrank to that one small, impossible connection. Then the doorbell rang again. The apartment felt smaller somehow, crowded with silence and unspoken things. I couldn't stop watching her, the way her hands fidgeted with the coffee cup, the way her eyes kept darting toward her phone like it might explode with news at any moment. I shouldn't be here, I blurted, voice sharp, betraying more than I intended. I mean, it's crazy. She didn't answer. Her lips pressed together, jaw tight, like she was holding back a storm. That made me angrier at myself. Angry that I couldn't leave. Angry that I wanted to stay. Angry that I wanted her in ways I shouldn't even name. You're thinking about him, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Your ex tonight. You're worried about what he'll say, what he'll do. She flinched at the mention, then her shoulders sagged. He's persistent, she admitted, quiet, almost like a confession to herself rather than me. Her eyes met mine then, and I saw something raw, something vulnerable I wasn't supposed to see. My heart clenched. I wanted to tell her to forget him, to stay here, to let us, exist for just one night without consequence. But even saying that felt like crossing a line I didn't deserve to cross. I leaned closer, just a fraction, and caught the faint scent of her perfume, something warm, soft, dangerously intoxicating. And you want me to leave? I asked, almost pleading, though I couldn't bring myself to move. She shook her head slowly, eyes wide. I don't know, she whispered. Her voice cracked at the edges, and I felt it, every tremor, every hesitation. My chest ached at the vulnerability she hadn't shared with anyone else in years. I swallowed hard. I wanted to reach for her face, to trace the line of her jaw, but I stopped. Just 1 inch closer, and I'd crossed the threshold we'd been tiptoeing around. I can't stop thinking about you, I admitted, barely a breath, and my fingers brushed hers on the counter. She didn't pull away, and that tiny refusal to retreat made my chest hammer. My pulse was loud in my ears. Her hand trembled slightly under mine. You're too young, she said, a bitter laugh escaping her. You don't understand, then teach me, I said before I could stop myself. Teach me what it's like to be with you. I'll learn. Her gaze dropped, and for a moment, the room felt suspended. I wanted to close the space between us, wanted to kiss her, wanted to erase all the rules that told me I shouldn't. But then her phone buzzed again, sharp and insistent. She jumped slightly, eyes wide, fingers tightening around it. I could feel my stomach sink. Reality was calling, dragging us both back from the edge. I didn't move. She didn't move. But the air between us was charged, taut, waiting. Waiting for something neither of us could name aloud. I leaned just a fraction closer, heart thundering, and the space between us was a whisper. Then her phone lit up again, a message preview flashing across the screen, and I realized whatever happened next couldn't be undone. The phone buzzed again, but this time I saw her hesitation before she even looked. She didn't reach for it. Her fingers hovered above the screen like she was deciding whether to let the world crash in, or keep it at bay. I should see him, she muttered, almost to herself, and my stomach dropped. The words weren't just a suggestion. They were a command I wasn't ready to obey. You don't have to, I said quickly, voice tighter than I intended. You don't owe him anything. Her laugh was bitter, sharp, almost painful. I do, she said, eyes not meeting mine. He's persistent. And if I don't. Her sentence ended with a sigh, a soft surrender. I felt something inside me tighten, a mix of anger and fear. Anger that he could intrude on this fragile bubble between us. Fear that she might slip away before we'd even begun. I wanted to tell her to forget him, to forget everything else, but I didn't. I couldn't. Words seemed too small. Then it hit me. Her cousin, the one I'd come over to meet, he'd been lurking outside earlier. Maybe he'd seen too much. Maybe he'd already pieced things together. The thought made my chest squeeze. What if this had already gone too far? I stopped, unsure what I could even say. My throat was tight, hands clenching the edge of the counter. She glanced at me, and in that look, I saw her own fear mirrored. "You don't get it," she whispered. "I've tried to ignore it, I've tried to control it, but it's not just him I have to think about." Her fingers shook slightly as she tucked a stray hair behind her ear. You can't just exist in my life like this. Not safely." The words cut through me, sharper than I expected. Not rejection, something far more complicated. A warning. A truth that neither of us could deny. "I don't care," I blurted, almost recklessly. "I don't care about the rules, or the timing, or what's safe. I want this. I want you." She froze. I saw the struggle play out across her face, the longing, the fear, the guilt, the possibility of something dangerous and beautiful all at once. Her lips parted slightly, and I wanted to cross the distance, wanted to bridge the chasm that had grown between words and touch. Then the twist came. Her phone buzzed again, and this time, I glimpsed the sender, a name I didn't recognize. My heart lurched as she swiped the screen open, reading quickly, eyes widening in shock. "What?" I started, but she didn't answer. Her hand shook as she held the phone, knuckles pale. The room suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. "They know," she whispered finally, voice barely audible. "Someone knows about us." Everything shifted. The quiet intimacy, the teasing glances, the tension we'd been navigating, all of it suddenly teetered on the edge of exposure. My mind raced, and I realized that nothing was safe anymore, not the apartment, not our feelings, not the fragile thread connecting us. Her eyes met mine, wide, desperate, vulnerable. "What do we do now?" And in that moment I knew whatever came next, there was no going back. The apartment felt impossibly quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your chest until it hurts. I could hear her breathing, irregular, like she was trying to steady herself against a tide I couldn't see. "I can't pretend anymore," I said, voice rough. "I can't act like this isn't happening, like I don't want you in ways I shouldn't." My hands trembled slightly as I reached for her, and this time, I didn't hesitate. Her eyes flickered up to mine, vulnerability shining through the careful walls she always kept. "You have no idea how dangerous this is," she whispered, almost to herself, but I felt the words hit me as if they were meant for both of us. "I do," I said softly. "But I don't care. I'm done pretending either." The tension between us was unbearable. I wanted to cross the last inch, the space that had held back every fleeting brush of fingers, every stolen glance. But I paused, because I saw the fear, the guilt, the longing, all of it mirrored in her gaze. And in that pause something shifted. She exhaled, slow, deliberate, as if she'd been holding the world inside her chest for decades. "I don't know if we can," she admitted, voice breaking, the first crack in the armor she'd worn so carefully. "I've been afraid. Afraid of losing myself. Afraid of losing everything else." I leaned closer, letting my forehead brush hers, just enough to feel the warmth of her skin. "Then don't think," I whispered. "Just be here with me. Now." Her hand rose, trembling, until it rested against my cheek. The softness, the hesitance, the tiny quiver in her fingers, it was everything I had wanted, all at once. I wanted to promise her forever, but I didn't. I wanted to say it wouldn't hurt, but I knew it would. Instead, I kissed her hand, gentle, reverent, letting the words hang in the space between us. She closed her eyes, leaning into the touch, and I felt a surge of relief, of triumph, of terror all at once. "I shouldn't," she murmured, but she didn't pull away. My chest tightened at the contradiction, the warning and the invitation in the same breath. The phone buzzed again on the counter, ignored now. Outside, the city moved on, oblivious to the storm in this small apartment. And for the first time, it felt like we were allowed to exist in our own chaos, however fleeting. Her lips finally curved in a small, reluctant smile, eyes glimmering with unshed tears. I realized then that whatever happened next, whether we were torn apart by reality, or held together by sheer will, we understood each other now. Fully. The storm wasn't over. The world still waited outside the walls, full of rules, expectations, consequences. But in this moment, with her hand in mine and the space between us collapsing, nothing else mattered. We weren't safe. We weren't ready. We weren't sure of anything. And somehow, that made it perfect. Morning came slow, pale light creeping across the apartment floor, painting her hair in shades of silver and gold. I hadn't slept, and I wasn't sure she had either. We hadn't spoken much, words felt unnecessary. Instead, we moved in the small orbit of each other, sharing coffee, warmth, and silence that somehow carried more meaning than hours of talking ever could. Her hand found mine across the table, fingers curling into mine like they'd always belonged there. The memory of last night, the tension, the near collapses, the confessions, we'd survived it all. And in surviving, we'd discovered something fragile and real, something worth holding. "I still can't believe you're here," she said softly, eyes on the window, voice hesitant but steady. "I thought maybe I was just imagining it." "You weren't," I said, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. My heart thudded in a way I didn't care to hide. "I've never imagined anything like this." We both laughed softly, a shared sound that felt like permission to exist outside the rules we'd so carefully followed. There were still complications, calls to return, expectations to navigate, but for now, they didn't matter. For now, it was just us. She leaned back in her chair, eyes studying me with that same quiet gravity that had first pulled me in. "It's risky," she murmured. "But worth it." "Then we'll take the risk," I whispered. "Together." Her smile was small but genuine, and for the first time, it felt free. Free from hesitation, free from past ghosts, free from the fear that had haunted our every move. We weren't pretending anymore. We weren't hiding. We were simply here, and somehow, that felt like enough. I wanted to stay in that moment forever, to memorize the way the sunlight hit her face, the subtle tremor in her fingers as they brushed mine. But life, as always, had other plans. The phone buzzed again, emails and messages waiting, the world outside the apartment door ready to pull us back into routine. Yet the difference this time was profound. We faced it together, shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand, unafraid to exist in the gray space between rules and desire, expectation and reality. "I never thought this could happen," she whispered, voice almost reverent. "Not like this." "Neither did I," said, squeezing her hand, letting the warmth seep in, letting the gravity of it sink into my chest. But it did. And in that quiet, messy, beautiful moment, I realized it didn't matter what anyone else thought. We had each other. That was enough to rewrite everything we believed impossible. The apartment hummed with life, the city continuing on outside, oblivious to the quiet revolution that had just taken place inside. And we stayed, for a long time, just like she said we could, until nothing else existed but the weight of our hands, the warmth of our shared breath, the certainty that we had chosen each other. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?